Imagine a world without tea. No quiet morning cup, no evening moment of calm, no steaming mug warming your hands on a cold day. For billions of people today, tea is more than a drink. It's a ritual, a comfort, and sometimes even a symbol of culture and identity. But tea wasn't always everywhere. In fact, the story of tea begins thousands of years ago with a single accident. And that accident would eventually shape global trade, spark wars, influence empires, and become one of the most consumed beverages on Earth. This is the history of tea. The story of tea begins in ancient China, around 2737 BCE. According to Chinese legend, the discovery happened during the reign of Emperor Shennong, a ruler known for his interest in agriculture, medicine, and plants. Shennong believed that water should always be boiled before drinking it to keep people healthy. One day, while traveling through the countryside, the emperor's servants began boiling water beneath a tree. As the water simmered, a few leaves from the tree drifted into the pot. The water slowly changed color. Curious, Shennong tasted the strange new drink. He found the flavor refreshing, slightly bitter, but deeply calming. And just like that, tea was born. Whether this story is myth or reality, historians agree that China is the birthplace of tea. For centuries, tea remained a local secret, known only within Chinese culture, but its influence was slowly growing. By the time of the Tang Dynasty in the 7th century, tea had already become an important part of Chinese society. People drank it not only for pleasure, but also for its believed health benefits. Monks used tea to stay awake during long hours of meditation. Scholars drank tea while studying and writing poetry. Travelers carried tea for energy and refreshment on long journeys. During this period, tea preparation also became more refined. Leaves were steamed, compressed into cakes, and ground into powder before being whisked with hot water. Tea drinking evolved into an art. In fact, during the 8th century, a Chinese scholar named Lu Yu wrote the world's first book about tea called The Classic of Tea. This book explained everything from how tea should be grown, to how water should be boiled, to the perfect way to drink it. For the first time, tea was not just a drink, it was a philosophy. For hundreds of years, tea remained largely within China, but eventually, traders and travelers began carrying tea across borders. Around the 9th century, Buddhist monks brought tea seeds from China to Japan. There, tea became closely tied to Zen Buddhism. Japanese monks used tea to maintain focus during meditation. Over time, Japan developed its own unique tea traditions. This eventually led to the creation of the Japanese tea ceremony, a deeply symbolic ritual centered around harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. Meanwhile, tea continued spreading slowly across Asia through trade routes. But Europe still had no idea what tea was. That would soon change. Tea first arrived in Europe during the early 1600s. Portuguese and Dutch traders traveling to China encountered the drink and quickly became fascinated by it. Soon, ships began carrying tea back to Europe. At first, tea was extremely rare and expensive. Only the wealthy could afford it. It became a fashionable drink among aristocrats. In England, tea gained popularity after Catherine of Braganza, a Portuguese princess who married King Charles II, brought her love of tea to the British royal court in the 1660s. Soon, drinking tea became a trend among British elites. Elegant tea parties became social events. Fine porcelain cups and delicate teapots were introduced. Tea was no longer just a drink. It had become a symbol of sophistication. But Britain's growing love for tea would soon create a global economic shift. By the 1700s, tea had become incredibly popular in Britain. demand exploded, the British East India Company began importing massive quantities of tea from China. However, there was a problem. China had little interest in European goods. They preferred payment in silver. This caused a huge trade imbalance for Britain. To solve this problem, the British began exporting opium to China. The plan worked financially, but it had devastating consequences. Millions of Chinese citizens became addicted to opium. When the Chinese government attempted to stop the trade, tensions escalated. Eventually, this conflict led to the Opium Wars in the mid-1800s. These wars forced China to open more ports to foreign trade and significantly changed global power dynamics. All of it partly fueled by the world's growing thirst for tea. Because Britain relied heavily on Chinese tea, they began searching for ways to grow it themselves. Their solution came from India. In the 1820s, British explorers discovered wild tea plants growing in the region of Assam. This discovery changed everything. Soon, large tea plantations were established across India. Later, tea cultivation spread to Sri Lanka, which was then known as Ceylon. These colonies became major suppliers of tea for the British Empire. Production skyrocketed. Tea became cheaper and more accessible. For the first time, ordinary working-class people could afford it. Tea quickly became Britain's national drink. It was served in factories, homes, and workplaces, and it became deeply embedded in daily life. One of the most famous tea traditions began in the early 1800s. At that time, dinner in Britain was served very late in the evening. This left a long gap between lunch and dinner. A woman named Anna, the Duchess of Bedford, found herself feeling hungry during the afternoon. Her solution was simple. She began asking for tea, bread, butter, and small cakes in the afternoon. Soon, she began inviting friends to join her. This small habit turned into a fashionable social ritual, and thus, afternoon tea was born. Today, afternoon tea remains one of the most iconic traditions associated with British culture. Tea also played a surprising role in American history. In the 1700s, the British government placed heavy taxes on tea in the American colonies. Colonists believed these taxes were unfair because they had no representation in the British Parliament. Tensions grew. Then, in 1773, a group of American colonists decided to protest. Disguised as Native Americans, they boarded British ships in Boston Harbor. They threw 342 chests of tea into the water. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party. It was one of the key moments that led to the American Revolution. Once again, tea had influenced world history. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, tea had spread across the world. Different cultures developed their own unique tea traditions. In India, chai became a spiced milk tea enjoyed daily by millions. In Morocco, mint tea became a symbol of hospitality. In Russia, tea was traditionally served using a samovar. In Turkey, strong black tea became a central part of social life. And in Britain, tea remained a daily ritual. Tea had transformed from an accidental discovery into a global cultural phenomenon. Today, tea is the second most consumed beverage in the world, after water. Every day, billions of cups are poured across the globe. The largest tea-producing countries include China, India, Kenya, and Sri Lanka. Tea is grown in lush plantations across mountains, valleys, and tropical regions. And the variety of tea is enormous. Green tea, black tea, white tea, oolong tea, herbal infusions, each with its own flavor, history, and tradition. But no matter the variety, all true tea comes from the same plant, Camellia sinensis. It's remarkable to think that something so simple could shape history in such powerful ways. Tea influenced trade routes. It played a role in wars and revolutions. It shaped cultures and daily rituals across continents, from ancient Chinese emperors to British royalty to modern households around the world. Tea has remained a constant companion throughout human history, all from a few leaves that once fell into a pot of boiling water thousands of years ago. And today, as you take a sip of tea, you're not just drinking a beverage, you're participating in a tradition that has traveled across centuries, a story that began with curiosity and continues with every cup.